All right, welcome back. Welcome back to Beloved Soulpreneurs. This is episode 5 of season 2, and I'm so excited today. We have Liz Roberta on all the way from Costa Rica. Liz is, for those of you that are new to Liz's work, a Hay House author of Living in Tune, which is the book that she has just released actually earlier this year, so it's still pretty fresh in the world. She's also an award-winning spiritual coach and business coach, spiritual business coach as well. She leads one-to-one sessions as well as group programs, including her signature program, Spiritual Coaching Academy. I know recently you've just launched Best-Selling Book Queen as well, which looks amazing, and Money Medicine, and I think there's a few others. There's Sacred Sisters Members Club as well. So many beautiful offerings out in the world. I think Liz is a few years into her into this business. That's correct. Yeah. And I'm so excited to speak to Liz today because I discovered her earlier this year. It's been really inspiring to follow your expansion this year and also just see the integrity and joy and fun with which you bring stuff out into the world. You feel like a kindred spirit to me. So yeah, thank you for coming on today, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that introduction. You really know my programs. Wow.
Yeah, I had a little check on the website. There's a new one as well, Business Expander, I saw.
Yeah, Q1 of 2023. That'll be coming out. Yeah.
Really exciting. And if you guys haven't checked out her Sacred Sisters Members Club, there's so much good stuff in that. I was actually re-listening to some of the voice notes that you sent to me, and you're like, there's a past life regression, there's just so much good stuff in that. So go check it out if you are looking for more community and to expand in these spaces. So I'm going to put a pin in that. Otherwise, I could just go. We'll loop back around to that at the end. But I want to start. This podcast is all about women living their soul's purpose and power. And it's very much for women that are just embarking on their journey to have examples of those women a little bit further ahead, both to share stories and insights and experience. So it's part personal, it's part professional. And I really like to start back at the beginning because I think for so many of us that take a spiritual journey and merge that with the entrepreneurial path, the spiritual side really is a passion. It really is a calling. It's really deep within us. And oftentimes that means it starts right back early in our childhood, some of those sensitivities, some of those gifts. So I'm really intrigued to ask, what did that look like for you? What was little Liz like?
Little Liz, it's so funny you use those words. That's what I call my inner child. Little Liz is, what I call her. So I've always been spiritual, which was really interesting because I had no influence of it around me. So I was raised Catholic, went to a Catholic school. Back then I was born in 92, so grew up, not having the internet or anything like that. And I was always interested in it, though. I was obsessed with fairies. I got into tarot when I was 14. I would do spells when I was younger, which I say at the beginning of Living in Tune, how I cut out spells from Ms. magazine. And literally that was my that was my preoccupation. I'd get my £5 pocket money. I would walk into town in Poole and Dorset, which is where I grew up. And I would literally write a little list, and it would be like, right, I need a pink candle. I need some rose oil, frankincense. And no joke, that is what I would spend my pocket money on, because I would be doing spells at home. And I truly believed they would work. It wasn't to play. I was actually doing spells to manifest things. And I've done a lot of past life work. And of course, I've been a witch many times and a spiritual teacher over and over and over and over again. So I just had this innate knowing that I could manifest, that I could make things happen. And I always had a kind of spiritual connection. I lost it for a long time during my teenage years and early 20s. And then throughout my 20s, it was a journey of reclaiming that part of me and realizing that I actually had a spiritual calling. And a lot of that happened through my career. Like I did a career in investment banking, first of all, and then in fashion. And it was through my deep unhappiness and discontentment in those careers that I was actually able to figure out, oh, I'm meant to be doing spiritual work. Oh, this has actually been my hobby all along, but I didn't know how to make money from it. I thought it would be too good to be true. I didn't see anyone around me doing it. But it has always been part of me. And like I say, even though I did kind of lose it throughout my teenage years, 'cause I had depression and eating disorders, and it was just like a total mess basically during that time. I was a goth, which no one could ever believe I was. I had black hair, piercings, the whole thing. So I was in a very dark place, but I still even had tarot then. So tarot's been with me over half of my life, and I have a very close relationship with tarot.
Very interesting. Thank you. I can't imagine you as a goth now. I mean, even, yeah, wow. You're going to have to share some of those photos one day. I'm really interested in asking, this is a little tangent question on that. When you started to shut things down as you were going through, some of those more challenging, darker periods of your teenage years and maybe early 20s, did you feel like you still had that connection to your intuition, but you would just, you would feel it and turn the other way? Or did it lessen, or was it a bit of both? How did that kind of, what was the experience of that for you?
Great question. So I definitely did still have it. I remember making choices, and I'd go with a choice that was logical, and I would feel a terrible gut feeling, for example, or I'd feel massive resistance, but go with it anyway, because I didn't know about living in tune then. No one talked about intuition. And this, of course, was the impetus for writing the book, because I think we teach about what we most need ourselves. And I definitely did still have the intuition. I just had never heard of the word intuition. I didn't know what it was. I hadn't made enough mistakes to know that I should follow it. And I think we learn to follow it from all the times that we do have that terrible feeling. And my head was so headstrong. I was like, right, I'm going to do that. That's logical. While my body was going, no, but I didn't know to trust my body or trust myself. So yeah, it definitely was always there. I just wasn't following it. I've always been extremely sensitive, as I'm sure you have as well, and many people listening. I was definitely an empath and a very sensitive child. I mean, I have multiple memories from childhood where I'd have to be taken out of the room because a dog would get killed in a film, or in Lake Placid they push a cow into the river for the crocodile blindfolded, and I was just inconsolable. And on Newsround there were some seals getting culled, and I had multiple memories of just being completely inconsolable. And I was always very connected to Mother Earth, and I felt pain very, very deeply, which was so interesting because I had a lot of trauma in childhood, and my stepdad was an alcoholic and very kind of turbulent. So that mix of my sensitivity was really an initiation into doing this work, because I learned a lot and I felt everything so deeply.
Wow, yeah, I hear this so often, and it really, I personally have this, well, both gut feeling and experience that often people that step into kind of a healer's path or a spiritual path really do have some big challenges along the way, because like you say, there are initiations. We learn our lessons through our challenges. Our challenges are in fact our greatest opportunities for spiritual growth. And on a soul level, the older the soul, the wiser the soul, you're able to get through it, even when it happens in more vulnerable times. And so we often see, right, some of the most influential spiritual teachers, their biggest challenges happened when they were most vulnerable as a child, because at a soul level, they knew they would be able to pull through to the other side. And I think that's such an amazing reframe. If anyone that's listening is kind of at the point of being like, why am I going through this? And that can happen at many different times of our journey. Those dark nights of the soul doesn't just happen once to some people. Looking at it as an opportunity for spiritual growth has been so reassuring along the way. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And also this important piece of we're taught to trust the logical mind. This is part of the patriarchy: trust what you can see, science, all of that, right? And we're not taught to trust the feminine, the physical body, the felt sense. And one thing I loved so much about your book is you made it clearer than I've ever, I think, read it before, where you said it's kind of this simple, the egoic mind is thoughts, and intuition is feelings. And because we're not taught to understand what intuition is, I think that's just the clearest way of being feel into it. The mind's going to be loud, but a feeling is very different. That's a really clear distinction for me. So thank you for that. And it never goes away. The mind might get louder, but the intuition is always there. It's always available to us. It's a really great distinction as well. Thank you. So based on that, the intuition was always there. Goth Liz moves through her initiations, moves into her 20s. becomes a young lady, goes into uni, and then what happens when, talk me through that and how you knew like what your body was telling you through that period until you stepped into what we now know to be, you know, your soul's path and alignment.
Yeah. So first of all, I love that you made that parallel between the toxic masculine that is dominating Western culture and people's aversion to spiritual topics, intuition, anything like that. It's all about the logic, the scientific method, empiricism. And you're so right, that is the unbalanced masculine. And this is like my life's purpose, is to bring that balance, not to swing it completely the other way. It's balance. Like we still need those things. They both have their place, but just create more of a balance, because we are in the very unbalanced masculine at the moment. So to answer your question, it really came to a head. So I was working at JP Morgan, which again, people can never quite imagine when they see me now, but I was. And I was in the grey suit, mainly men. I was working in the investment bank in an area called custody, where we looked after money of these kind of massive companies, top 50 companies. So it was very stressful. And what started happening was I was getting crippling headaches. So all day, every day, I would have a crippling headache at the front of my head. Obviously, now I would immediately go, oh, it's to do with your third eye. Again, I didn't have this language. I had no context for this. This is back in the early 2010s. So, I mean, Instagram had maybe just come out then. So I get a lot of my knowledge from Instagram, as I'm sure many people do. But again, that wasn't available back then. So I had crippling headaches. Don't think I even knew what a third eye was. And I also had terrible heart palpitations. I would sweat. I had insomnia, nightmares, and I was just in this kind of never-ending cycle. And I went to the doctor because I was like, something's wrong. What's wrong with my headaches? So, you know, have I got a brain tumor? There's something wrong. I had an eye test. I didn't know what the problem was. And the doctor, after doing all the tests, like I wore an ECG heart monitor for a day, I tried various medications, blood tests, like all the things. It was nothing physical. They were like, you're fine physically, but you have generalized anxiety disorder. And I was like, what? I'd never heard of this. And I've been so used to functioning this way for so long because of my upbringing, and we never had any money. So like when I was at university, I was working 2 jobs. I was a admin assistant at a lettings company. I was also working at Costa, which is a coffee shop. So I'd always been functioning just, you know, at the end of my sanity and the end of my physical capacity. But what my body and brain had done to cope is given me this anxiety disorder, because I always had to be going. I couldn't be calm, otherwise something would fall apart. So that was basically how my journey started, because I found out I had generalized anxiety disorder. The Western solution was to give me beta blockers and antidepressants. And I was like, well, what am I going to do? Take these every day forever? Like there's no, it's not a cure. It's helping the symptoms.
Yeah.
Symptoms. And I was like, I generally like to do things naturally. I'll only take things that, you know, if I really have to. So I didn't like the idea of just taking pills every day forever. So then I started going into holistic remedies. So I tried Reiki for the first time. I started looking into crystals. I had acupuncture for the first time, hypnotherapy. And then it was actually hypnotherapy that worked. It was 3 sessions. And that got rid of my generalized anxiety disorder, which at the time was completely crippling. It ruled my whole life. I remember being in bed with my boyfriend, who's now my husband, and I'd get up in the middle of the night and just sit at the end of the bed because I was like a furnace. Like I would literally be radiating heat just from the amount of cortisol and stress. I was in this constant state of fight or flight, like I was about to go into an exam. Like that's how I felt all day, every day. So then I could never sleep. And it was absolutely horrendous. And I had, you know, back knee, and that's when I developed psoriasis. And it was all very, very physical. But through that very physical expression, that's actually what I needed to make me notice it. And it was through that physical healing journey that I got into holistic methods. The holistic methods trumped the Western logical methods that I'd been trained to, you know, revere above everything else. And that really got me diving into, okay, well, what's a third eye? And then I did a 3-hour third eye binaural beats meditation, and I started seeing visions for the first time. Like a screen had been pulled down in front of me, and I saw 3 things that then happened in my life. And it just kind of spiraled from there, really. But I think it was so interesting that my soul agreed for that to happen, because I wouldn't have done it any other way. I would have just carried on plodding along the easy path. It's much easier to be in normal society with the majority than to go off piste and become a spiritual teacher. And I needed it to be so terrible and so unbearable, and for the Western medical option not to work for me, that I was forced into this other path, and that did work. And because it worked, I was like, this is interesting. What else can I do? What else can I heal? And that got me, really interested in energy work. And I just started learning about it more and more. And by the time I left investment banking, I then worked in fashion, and I started getting up an hour earlier every morning to do trainings on Mind Valley and to learn about, energy work and all these kind of things, removing energy blocks. And then I started getting into entrepreneurship because I loved it so much. I was like, I need to do this. Fashion was fun, but I didn't have a sense of purpose. So it's been a really long journey, and I'm sure we'll talk about the entrepreneurship section, which came after all that, but none of this happened overnight. My spiritual path has been my entire life, and getting into this line of work, the path was kind of laid from university, even though I was doing other things that all tied in together so well to eventually lead me to my purpose. And actually the pain and suffering was such an important part of that, because it guided me to things. And if it had been okay, I would have just carried on. It would be easier for me to be in investment banking. Everyone would respect it, and everyone would be patting me on the back. Whereas now I go to weddings and people are like, what? Like, people don't get it. So it's not for the faint-hearted, but it's the most satisfying thing ever, and I will do it till I die.
Wow, I love that. So many parallels. And I love what you're saying. For anyone out there that's at the stage where they're like, okay, this doesn't feel like it's fulfilling me. I don't know why I'm doing it. I know that I'm going to be moving to something else. Amazing. And this piece that you said about, with hindsight, understanding the purpose in everything, like every piece of your path, like we're always being led by spirit, we're always being led by our higher self. And even when we go off track, like all of that stuff is so rich in its learnings and what it gives us. And so just to be gentle with ourselves when we feel like maybe we want to meander, that actually all of it does weave together. And I think, especially, we'll come on to this later exactly, but what you were saying about even the career paths that you chose that were so stressful for your body have been really helpful in your entrepreneurship, the marketing and the how to run a profitable business. There were skills that learned along the way. So thank you so much for that. I can really relate. I went through generalized anxiety, social anxiety in my 20s as well. Also had a very successful corporate career that the universe literally kicked me out of. I did not go easily. I was very stubborn. And the being sensitive as a child as well. I remember being in rooms and feeling like a dark energy in the room, and I would just go into complete terror, and like my mum having to remove me and me not being able to sleep in that room, like, would happen again and again in different places, in our attic. And then I just shut that down because it was too intense to be in a big city and be in places where the energy is really already hectic and have everything open. So I just closed everything down. And so interesting, lastly, on what you said about the trauma, like actually so many of us are stuck in the sympathetic nervous system, which is our stress response, right? Fight, flight, fawn, freeze. And when we're kind of burning the candle at both ends, coffee, alcohol, playing hard at weekends, playing hard at weekends, working hard in our jobs, I think such a huge proportion of like the mainstream is actually to more and less degrees within that sympathetic state all of the time.
I totally agree. And when you're out of it, exactly like you said, I was just a maniac, and I have always had a lot of energy, so I was able to do it. But I'd be going out every English person in their early 20s. I was working hard. I was on the graduate scheme, so there was like extra stuff as well outside the job. We'd have to do, you know, presentations and kind of extra things as well as a busy job. And then my whole social life revolved around what outfit was I going to wear at the weekend, because I was going clubbing. I'd, you know, be going all around the country to visit friends every weekend. I'd be getting the train somewhere, the coach somewhere. I'd be going out, going back on Sunday completely hungover, rolling into work on a Monday for a trade meeting at 10 a.m. And it was just like, how did
right?
how did I do that? Yeah.
And it's so wild, because I think once you start doing energy work, and like in the space of being a spiritual coach or entrepreneur, you know, I could speak to someone that works 50 hours a week in London still, and they'd be like, wait, you do like 8 hours a week with clients, or like 4 hours a week? Like, what? That's nothing. But it's so different, and it's so deeply in tune. And at the same time, now you're listening to your body. So as soon as you're out of whack, you can really feel it, and you pull yourself back. So yeah, I think when I look back and think, how did I do that? How did we do that during that period? I think so many people aren't in their bodies. They're not feeling, and they're trying to, as when you stay busy, you don't have to feel. And it's only those moments that you say, middle of the night, you wake up and you're like, whoa, like this is not a relaxed state. Yeah. Thank you.
Totally.
So one thing I think that's really beautiful and inspiring about your path is this. You refer to it in your book as a dichotomy. The dichotomy between being really practical. You know, you could do the corporate world. You were really successful in it, in fact. And I think, you know, writing at school in English, there was this very practical Liz that, you know, she can make stuff happen. She does have a lot of energy. She can operate in the material world, the mainstream world really, really well. And yet this part of you that was very spiritual. And you talk about moving to Glastonbury, following your intuition to move to Glastonbury. And while you were there, being like, I'm not all spiritual. Like I'm not fitting fully in the spiritual camp. So I've gone into one extreme, investment banking over here, the fashion world, and then I've gone to the other extreme of that polarity, Glastonbury, as, you know, like literally spiritual mecca. Where do I fit within this? And what was really beautiful, I think, was that you recognized there was a moment of being like, this feels really lonely. I feel like I don't fit in either camp. And then understanding this beautiful moment of illumination and wisdom of like, wow, this is what makes me unique. This is what maybe no one else has, and this is where my purpose lies. And so I'd love for you to just unpack that a little bit more for anyone that's listening, and also talk about how you navigated the two sides of that. One is it's a gift and it's my purpose, and the other side of it, it comes with its challenges, and one of them is loneliness.
Yes. You said that so well. And it really is the worst feeling in the world when you leap from one thing thinking you're going to find your answer, your home, your place in the world in another thing. And then, I mean, it was great. I loved my time in Glastonbury. It was incredible. It was really a formative period for me. But I expected to go and find my people. I expected to be like, this is going to solve, you know, all the issues, all the loneliness I'd been feeling in the other world as I got more and more into spirituality. And I went there and I was completely immersed in the spiritual world. And it was kind of driving me a little bit crazy, because there was this lack of structure, you know, everything opened late, no one really stuck to any times. And that was all driving me a bit crazy, the floatiness of it all. And I was like, oh, but I'm not like this either. And then I was like, well, what the hell am I then? I'm like an alien. I don't fit here. I don't fit there. Like, where do I fit? And there was a series of signs from the universe where it basically was like, you're meant to be like this. You're meant to be both. And there are actually people in the world who are both. So, you know, they're your people. And of course, as time goes on, I've managed to find a lot of those people. But also what I found was that a lot of people in the spiritual community needed my structure. You mentioned about marketing. I did my master's in marketing. I lectured in marketing later on in my 20s. And people really needed that. I kept coming up against people who had incredible spiritual skills, like amazing psychics and healers, but they hated stuff like email lists and marketing themselves, selling themselves. And I was like, I love this though. This is so fun. And it seemed really logical and intuitive to me. And I realized I had a lot of gifts to give in that area. So I think the lesson there is for anyone who feels like they don't really fit in, I really think it's because you're meant to forge a whole new path. And there's a chapter in Living in Tune called Pioneer, which is kind of about this. And it's like, some people are meant to do something different. Like, if you don't feel like you fit in, you're not meant to. And it really goes back to trust and I believe that as a soul, before we come here, we choose our path, we choose our experiences. So because I believe that, I'm like, right, I'm exactly how I'm meant to be. All of my experiences are exactly what's meant to be happening. So how can I use this in the best way possible? How can I create the best of this situation, which I believe that as a soul I chose for myself? So luckily, thank goodness, I'm completely out of that phase now, and I love who I am, I love what I do, and I'm less kind of concerned with fitting in. But I definitely had this fear of being lonely, big fear of being different, which I think goes back to the witch wound sometimes as well, like not wanting to be different and stand out. And I'd spent my whole life trying to fit in. So then the universe giving me this lesson of, oh, you don't fit in here, you don't fit in there, was like my biggest fear realized. But then, you know, I got through it. And for anyone who's in that position now, like, your people are out there. There's what, 7 or even 8, I don't know what we're at now, billion people in the world. Your people are out there. There's so many communities out there. Like you mentioned, Sacred Sisters, this is why I did it, to meet people who are like you. And I think when you set the intention, you will attract the right people for you. What was the second question that you asked?
I think you've answered it. It was the loneliness piece. It was
yes,
like,
okay,
moving into the purpose side of it, and the gift and the loneliness.
yeah,
Yeah, you answered it beautifully.
okay, perfect.
Thank you so much. And yeah, it's this piece I'm kind of feeling as you're saying as well, you know, really deepening into acceptance of, it was like 2 sides of it, like, this is me, and that enables you to then allow yourself to be seen, right? Which then in return you start to meet people that like you, like attracts like, but you have to kind of come out of that hiding. But the other piece, which is really, really, really powerful, and I feel like it's something that we can fall in and out of, we forget, we remember, we forget, we remember, which is, you're right where you're meant to be. You haven't done anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. Your soul has orchestrated every moment. And like you said, put together all of the experiences that you've had for a purpose. There's a grand intelligence behind it. And I think your remembrance in that moment of being like, wait a sec, if I'm where I'm meant to be and my soul's got this down, then how can I use this? How is it serving me? And that takes us out of that feeling of, like, you know, the victimization that can come up at times when we're feeling vulnerable, or we're feeling like, hey, this is new territory. And especially breaking out of, you know, many people want to call it that matrix of how we're really brought up to be, the programmed way of not to be different, that tribal mentality that is ancestral and so wired into our DNA, that we have a lot of like work to do to break out of that. It does feel scary, and remembering that it's okay, our soul has got us. For me, I just find like that's a massive reassurance. It's not just down to us with being guided. So thank you for that. So after this, swing one way, swing the other way, came back to center. Hey, look, all of me is welcome here, and this is actually my power and my purpose. Your business began to take off, and it looks like it's grown so fast over the next few years. What would you accredit that to?
My raw determination. Yeah, I'm just a bit crazy. I don't have like many days off. I can just go, very kind of generator. I will go to the ends of the earth, and nothing will stop me. That's like the only thing I can attribute it to.
What's your moon sign?
So I actually follow the Vedic system. I'll tell you both. So Western, I'm a Taurus sun with a Libra moon, Virgo rising. And then my Vedic, which is what I follow, I'm an Aries sun with a Virgo moon and a Leo rising.
Yeah, that feels, yeah, okay. The latter feels more true in what I feel in you. Yeah.
Yeah. Both have the Virgo influence though.
Yeah.
So always been a massive perfectionist like my whole life, and very into like structure. I'm the most like organized person ever. I was always the organizer with my friends. I'm the organizer with my family, and I love it. I find it really satisfying. But that's what I can attribute it to, and resilience, which again I learned from childhood and growing up. And even when I was little, I was always an entrepreneur. I would stand outside and play the flute, literally in the street, because I played the flute and the violin when I was younger, and I was in the choir and the orchestra. and I would literally stand outside my house and play the flute, and I would busk. And because I was small and cute and like in my primary school uniform, people would give me money. The most hilarious one is I one time laid a blanket out and I took a load of stuff from the house to sell. And I remember we had this new pack of 6 glasses, like tumblers, unopened, and I just took them out and sold them. And I'm like, how funny is that? Like, if my child took a new pack of glasses I'd bought to sell on the street for like £3, I just didn't give a crap. I was so like, just, yeah, I'm going to sell this, I'm going to make some money. And I was always like this. And I used to sell nail art at school. I remember piercing people's nails and like drawing on them in gel pen and then painting over them for like 10p. I had this little price list that I made. Like, I was always this hustler. I remember when I was in year 8, I went round and gave leaflets through everyone's doors to do dog walking, and I used to walk someone's dog again for like £3 for half an hour. But I was just a born entrepreneur. Like, I had no shame until I got to teenagehood, and then it was all about shame. I got completely engulfed in shame. But when I was younger, I literally had no shame at all. And I was just, and that's kind of always been in me, this little entrepreneur who's just happy to fight and do whatever I need to do.
I just love the ability to find the opportunity wherever it is. Like, those glasses are unopened. So brilliant. So brilliant. It's reminding me of when I must have been 8, 9. I started a little company trying to clean cars with my brother, and we invested because it was like maybe £20 from Argos. We put together our pocket money to get one of those handheld hoovers. I was so proud. I did like, our pricing list. I had a rota of what streets we were going to go to. And I remember I was heartbroken because on the second day, my brother was like, I'm out. It's too much work. I'm bored. And I was like, what? You're my partner in this. We've invested. What? And it didn't last very long because he left me lonesome on it. But in the beginning spirit was, I will never forget that story. Anyway, I had to share that with you. Okay, on to our next question. Tarot. I know this has been a love and a passion of yours. How did it play a part in the beginning of your business? And also, how did you come out of the spiritual closet? It's one thing to do the things that you love in spaces with friends where you feel safe, but suddenly to show up and be visible, especially when you've come out of a more mainstream world. How did you navigate that, and what helped you be able to do that?
Great questions. So to start with the tarot, tarot actually was the start of my business. So I started blogging in 2018. It was 2018 when I realized, I meant to write a book, and I never decided. I wasn't someone who always felt like they wanted to write a book, not at all. I was like into like business and marketing, never had a desire to write a book. Didn't study English or anything like that past GCSE. Like, all my A levels and my degree were like economics, business type things. So that was never within me. But what happened is all the words were being given to me. So I'd be walking down the hallway and I'd be getting like all these words coming through that I had to catch. So I basically was tasked with writing a book, and I put them into a Word document. I had 30,000 words. So I was like, right, okay, clearly I'm meant to write a book. So then in 2018, I started looking into getting a book deal. I knew it had to be with a traditional publisher, not self-published. Like, I knew that from the outset, and I knew it was because of the logistics, because when you go with a publisher, they'll get it in bookstores, they'll get it all over the world, as opposed to, say, self-publishing with Amazon KDP, and it's just like on Amazon and 1 or 2 other places. I knew without a doubt from the beginning I had to be with a publishing house. And then I got some signs it had to be with Hay House, even though they kept rejecting me for a few years, but eventually they gave in. But I knew it had to be published. I knew it had to be with Hay House. So in 2018, I was like, right, okay, I need to write a book. One of the things that I had to do from my research was start blogging. So I started blogging in 2018 every week. I started my website, which back then was called millennialmanifestor.com, because, like you said, coming out of the spiritual closet, I didn't have my name on anything. I didn't have my face on anything. It was all under Millennial Manifestor. My website, my Instagram, it was all no photo of me, quotes, like totally hiding.
It's such a stage, isn't it?
Yeah. Totally. But it, it's what I needed. That's how I felt safe. So I did that. And then when it got to the beginning of 2020, I'd spent all this time trying to get a book deal, blogging. I was lecturing at this point, but I was spending so much time doing all this stuff that I was like, I need to get paid something. Like, I'm spending so much time doing this. I got to a point, like, it was obviously fun, but it'd been like a year and a half, and I was like, okay, it's time to start getting some money for all of this time and all this energy I'm putting in. So then I was like, right, what can I do now? What can I do without training as a hypnotherapist or training as this or getting certified as a coach? What can I do right this second to start earning money? And I was like, read tarot. But I mean, even then, my Virgo self bought 4 tarot books and read them front to back, even though I've been reading it for like, however long. That is just so me. So I read 4 tarot books, and then just to kind of seal any gaps in my tarot knowledge. And then I started offering paid tarot readings. So that was actually the first way I started making money in my business. And then it was later on that I added one-to-one coaching. Then I started adding group programs, and then the membership. But it all started with tarot. That was how I started making money. So that really was the beginning of my business.
I love that. Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And for your year and a half when you were just creating content and just building up, I suppose, an audience,
Yeah.
just your name, did you do part-time work? How did you navigate that? And how did you stay, I suppose, so focused? Did you have any times in that of like wanting to throw in the towel within that year and a half? Or was that initial fire and enthusiasm to just have the freedom to do what you want to do, driving it? Like, what was the, trajectory?
Yeah. Great question. So when it began in 2018, that was when I was working in fashion. Anyone in the UK, I was working as a merchandiser at Next head office. So I was working there. Started getting desperately miserable. I actually got promoted and moved to the blouses team, and it was just like so immense, like crazy. And I was just getting really, really unhappy. The weirdest thing was I handed in my notice, and on the way home had 2 car crashes. And it was the strangest thing. It was like because I remember handing it in. It was in like February. It was dark. It was icy. Handed in my notice. I drove out, and I was listening to Christina Aguilera Soar, and I was like, whoa! And I was like, oh my god, I'm leaving. And then a car, Mercedes, right back into me. I got whiplash, so I couldn't like exercise for 6 weeks. It was this whole thing. And then my husband came to pick me up, and we left my car on like the side of like a side road because it was going to have to be collected and towed away. And then in his car, we were, bearing in mind, it's only like a 5-mile drive, and we were driving down, and then this car whizzed past like in between 2 lanes. I don't know what was going on, like a car chase. He was high or something, and he smashed someone's wing mirror, smashed someone's car, and then we skidded on the ice and the glass into someone else's car. And this was the same evening. And that evening, my whole family were also coming up to stay at our house, my mum's birthday, like my brother's family, my sister's family, my mum and my stepdad. And I'd had 2 car accidents. I'd just handed in my notice. Like, it was so wild. And I think about that energetically. And I think it was maybe part of me that wasn't ready for that transition. There was like some resistance in my energy where I handed it in and I was like, woohoo, I'm so excited. But then it was like, oh, part of me isn't ready. So there was like some kickback energetically with these 2 car accidents. Anyway, long story. It was just a really strange thing. So I left there, and then that was February. And then by May, I had been offered a job lecturing. So there was 3 months where I didn't know what I was doing. I was actually doing clinical trials for cash, which again is like another crazy thing, but I was always scrappy. So I'd get like 2.5 grand to stay in this facility for like 10 days, and super safe. Like, it sounds a lot scarier than it is, but the rules around it, like, it's totally fine. So I did 2 of those. I was like selling things on Facebook, eBay, like, yeah, just very kind of, again, entrepreneurial, just doing whatever I had to do. And we cut a lot of costs as well. Then the universe kind of swooped in to help me out and got me a lecturing job. So I actually finished like top of the year on my master's, and I always had a really good relationship with my head of year. I actually think we have like a past life connection, and I think it's from my life in Japan, and he actually has a Japanese wife, which is really interesting.
Wow.
So yeah, we always got on. He was very much like a mentor to me. And every year after I left my master's, he kept emailing me like, Liz, will you come in and do a lecture for the students on buying and merchandising? And every year I was like, no, because it was like 3 hours away. So I'd have to take a day off work, unpaid, to drive 6 hours and give a lecture like for free.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no. So, but the third time I'd left my job and I was kind of in the void trying to, figure out what I was going to do. Also at this time, I started an Amazon FBA business and a Shopify business. So I was just really kind of flapping around, trying to find my way. And he emailed me and I was like, okay, fine. And I was also going down to Poole for my birthday. And I went to Southampton University, so it wasn't too far away. So I gave the guest lecture. And then at the end of it, he was like, that was really good. Do you want to come in and do some lecturing? And it was part-time, but it was £40 an hour. So with like, for the marketing, for example, you do 70 assignments, you'd be getting like £1.5 grand. I was teaching 3 seminars a week. I was doing the odd lecture. Like it was just, I was making like as much as I was in fashion, but doing a tiny portion of the work. Okay. So it was like so crazy. And it also helped me to learn public speaking, because I hated public speaking. I was terrified of it, but also I was teaching these groups every week. So then I got better at public speaking. So it was very much a case of leaping and just kind of scrambling around. And then the universe came in and gave me this amazing opportunity. And that was back in 2019. And and then I got a book deal October 2020.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I love that. Okay. Remembering to leap and knowing that the universe will catch you and that all your needs are going to be met one way or another. I love that you've unpicked the past life connection there. And yeah, as you were saying about the car accident, I thought that was really interesting. And it almost felt like there was like some interruption of like, because I do think there's other forces in the universe. I do think that, we've got benevolent and malevolent. And it's so interesting to me that there was like, that's so stark and the timing of it so poignant.
It was really interesting. And
Liz is stepping into a power.
Yeah.
Like
it was so insane. Like 2 car, bearing in mind, touch wood, I've been, driving for, 12 years or something. And they're the only car accidents I've had. And they were both on the same evening, just after I gave in my notice to leave corporate life for the last time ever. It was very strange timing. And it's funny you say that about the malevolent, the energies, because I've had that in LA earlier this year when I started making Spiritual Coaching Academy. In the middle of the night, I got up, we'd like fallen asleep watching something on my laptop. So I got up, put it on the table. And as I walked away, it fell off onto the floor and broke. And it was so strange because I'd put it on the table and I knew it had been pushed off. And I was like, just as I was about to launch this my first group program, this was. And I knew my laptop had been pushed off. Thank goodness I was in LA and I was actually a 15-minute walk from the Apple store. And I also had Apple Care. So it got fixed. Whereas now I'm like in Costa Rica. I mean, who blimmin' knows what I'd do now? But that had been pushed off. I also had some other things happen. They were all in LA and they were all around this time when I was doing Spiritual Coaching Academy. And Spirit was trying to freak me out and like sabotage it. I've definitely had that. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't surprise me. I don't know if you've had the experience before, maybe on some of your group healing coaching calls, or even for you personally, oftentimes when I'm going to go through a big up level and really like claim more of my power, there's just more interruption. It might be like, yes, the other day I had a really powerful call with a mentor of mine, and this has never happened on my laptop before, ever. The charger lead was in and the laptop just turned off and wouldn't turn back on. So I had to call from my phone and we zoomed over my phone, and then it came back on like 2 hours later, and it's never happened. And I was just like, and we worked with some huge energies, and it was a really powerful and healing call, and it was all about my power. And I was like, wow, that's really not surprising that it's happened like that, yeah Just got to keep doing our thing, keep moving forward. Like you say, Spirit has our back every time. They can push the laptop off the table, but it's the time when you've got the Apple store around the corner. All's good. We're always going to be guided and supported. So keep going. And when you see those little signs, for me, it's weirdly like I have a belief it's like a knowingness, maybe, I don't know, maybe from other lives, like the dark works for the light, really. When we look at anything dark that happens, like I think it actually can serve to wake people up, to, you know, like it's all how it can be framed. So yeah. All right, so in your book, you talk about finding a purpose greater than you. You talk about this kind of delving into, hey, what do you care about? If there's a problem you can solve in the world. And then you have a brilliant technique that you refer to that you use with some of your clients of like asking why 3 times. And I want to ask you, what's the why behind your business?
Great question. So I very much feel like my purpose and my human design actually says something similar. I have like a gate of shock. And I find that what I do is I activate people, like without even trying to. I will help people to see things in a new way, or show them a different way, or activate them in some way. And like a lot of times it's just energetically. Like, for example, when I stayed next to Rachel Alice, like she'll wake up in the night. The first time we shared a bed together in London, she got up in the middle of the night and thought she was having a stroke because she had all this energy like going crazy. She's like, I can't be next to your energy. Like I just had this kind of activating energy. And like I had a really good reading with this incredible psychic in Australia, and she was like, your mission is to elevate the frequency of light workers so that light workers can come into their power and then raise the frequency of earth. So that really is my purpose. And what I really like to do is just help people to see differently. Like I really value open-mindedness, and I just think that if everyone is open to just seeing in a different way, you don't have to agree with it, but to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, which I've always found really easy to do. Like I can just kind of pop into anyone and see how they're viewing the world and why. But I think if everyone could do that, there'd be so much more understanding, and then we could all come together. So ultimately I'm trying to get everyone back to like oneness and love and compassion. But yeah, definitely the kind of frequency activating is my why, for sure. Elevating people's frequency.
Beautiful. I love that. And bless you, what a beautiful mission, number one, to bring us all back to wholeness, to elevate light workers. It feels quite shamanic to me as well, you know, that ability to kind of shapeshift and to really see through other people's eyes. I mean, part of it's empathy, but part of it's that kind of shamanic quality. And what popped into my mind, what I heard as you were saying that, was like that everyone's truth is valid. You know, we often, when we come out of harmony, we come into war, we come out of the state of kind of union and balance, is because we're fighting for our truth being right over another's. And something that is really been part of my message that I've been trying to share recently, and also just been so true for me, is like, I get to have my truth and they get to have theirs, you know, and we can, and that's beautiful. There's a diversity in that. And yes, there's a transcendent absolute truth, that's a whole other thing. But you know, like when it comes down to opinions, and it's really beautiful that there's a diverse range. So I love that. Wow about your energy with Rachel. And very cool. Thank you for sharing that. So anyone out there who's stepping into Liz's world or thinking to, that is what you're embarking on, elevation, and ready to be activated and to expand into that. Really cool. Thank you. So along the way, and I'm sure this will continue because this is part of life not being boring, there are always going to be challenges. I'm intrigued to ask, what have been, I mean, we've talked about the car crashes, pretty obvious external one. What have been some of the internal challenges that you faced?
Oh, wow. Fear of judgment is the first thing that's coming up as the biggest one. Intense fear of judgment. Yeah. Like I said before, I'd always really wanted to fit in. Of course, fitting in is where the safety is. I've always had really big friendship groups. So in primary school, secondary school, I was always in a friendship group of like 10 or 12, which is really interesting. I definitely found a lot of safety and security as part of a big group. And I was actually quite happy to, you know, water myself down or sacrifice parts of myself to have that security and be part of a group. So that fear of judgment has definitely been the hardest thing for me, I think, and the hardest thing to overcome. And that's why I said before, like I hid behind Millennial Manifestor. I was very afraid to come out. It's it's always always been my biggest challenge. And it's, it's a constant thing. It's a journey. There's always new layers, new levels, new devils. I used to be terrified of going on podcast interviews. I remember my first ever podcast interview. It was at 4 p.m. and I spent the whole day a nervous wreck. I wrote out my answers to each question. I was like rehearsing them. Whereas now I'm like, I do so many, I just kind of pop on and ramble. So it's something that I just get over with a lot of practice and basically proving, I can do this. It is safe for me to do this. But the fear of judgment has definitely been the hardest one for me, I think.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that so authentically. Do you, along that journey of having come out the closet and having kind of owned this spiritual mission, have you found that people have dropped away? Have you found that you've had to let go of certain groups or people of your life? Or has it been the opposite or a bit of both?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I haven't like cut anyone out or let go. I'd say there's been a natural change, evolution in closeness. And I think you can only hold space for so many people in your life. You can't be messaging every single friend all the time. Like, you only have so much space, so much time. So I've like brought in a lot of new people, but no, there's not been a cutting away. But you definitely realize where and family as well, you realize where some relationships were based on you being a certain way. And as you change, you no longer resonate. Like, they resonate with an old version of you. And as you grow and your interests change and your priorities change, and you look at things through the eyes of manifesting and what's the lesson and these kind of ways that I view things, and other people don't, it becomes jarring. Like, they don't see the way that you do, and you see them kind of as an old way that you used to be. Like, I'll get that and I'll be like, that's how I used to be, but I've changed, partly because I'm traveling so much that it really accelerates growth, but they're still there. So then you kind of outgrow people, and of course we all have different paths, but I really do think that that's okay. Like, some people are meant to be there for that stage in your life, like the people who, when I was a teenager and we would be getting drunk in Pool Park and getting up to mischief, like that was such a fun time in my life. So it's not like taking away from what certain relationships were at any point in time, but it definitely does evolve, and I have a lot of grace around that, and I'm happy with that. And doesn't mean that they won't come back in, but I know that things change, and I know we need different things and people and teachers at different points in our life.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. I love that. Definitely resonates, look, I can see what paradigm someone's in and where I was. And with just curiosity and no judgment, just that kind of like, that's interesting. And always kind of keep in my mind this idea of like, people either grow with us or they fall away, because at the end of the day, it's all energy, and like does attract like. So there's either, like you say, it's that resonance, or there's not. And I love that you use the word grace around that. Some people are meant to be there for, the whole book. Some people are just there for a paragraph or a chapter, a page, and just allowing that to be what it is without making it mean anything. I don't know about, maybe some listeners can resonate with that. For me, not making it mean anything has been a really big part of my learning with letting go, especially when it comes to relationships along the way. So thank you for sharing that. And capacity as well, right? We just have to be honest about what we can do. And that actually is not a question I've written down, but I'm going to throw it in because it feels really important. Boundaries. How has your expansion been linked to holding boundaries? And is this something that came naturally? Is it being a growth area? Yeah.
No, definitely not. Always had the belief that I can do it all and I can do everything, which has served me in terms of ambition. But then it also means I've like overstretched myself. This is why, I'd have anxiety and things like that. So I'm like, I can do everything. So I've definitely had like bad boundaries in that sense. Also the kind of people pleasing element, that kind of like, like overachiever element. And again, coming down to fear of judgment. Like I don't want people to see me negatively, or to see me as a failure, or, to not like me. So all of that has meant that boundaries have been a massive issue for sure. Because I want to do everything for everyone, and I find it hard to not do that. I've recently, I think it's only in the last maybe this year, 2022, I've started taking 1 day a week off. But like last year I didn't. It was 7 days a week.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it for the first couple of years of my business. And also overachiever was the same in the corporate world. And I felt comfortable and more in control that way. And there's also a piece here, right, which is the trauma piece of when we grow up in chaotic homes or we go through trauma, big or little t, a way of dealing with that when we are developing can be to be externally referencing, which can be, and especially if you're sensitive and empathetic, you can feel how someone else feels in their body when they're not happy with you. That doesn't feel safe. Little Liz, there's that part, the inner child can feel that, but that pattern can remain as well. And so there's like this nuance, I think, especially for like sensitivists and empaths, of like boundaries are harder to some extent, because you can feel what the effect is happening in the other person in a way that if you didn't have that sensitivity, you wouldn't, that's the other side of the coin. If you didn't have that sensitivity, you wouldn't be able to help and heal in the same way as well. But yes, thank you for talking to the boundaries. So I know you said, I think, did you say raw determination was one of the key things that's helped your business grow? I'm wondering if you could say maybe another 4 factors that have been integral to your growth in your business and entrepreneurship.
Okay, 4 things, right?
Yeah.
The first one is actually loving business. So actually the vast majority of books I read are business books. I'm reading the Bezos letters at the moment about how Amazon grew from nothing to the biggest company in the world. And obviously, like, Amazon doesn't, it has its issues, and Jeff Bezos is by no means a perfect person, but the fact that someone can create a company from nothing to the biggest company in the world, like, I'm so interested in business. So that's the first thing. You have to actually be interested in business and marketing and get over any resistance around that. A big business money block that I see in spiritual entrepreneurs is disliking business, having resentment towards business and companies, and making money from spiritual work, which of course is a massive block. So I'd say that's the first thing, getting really close with business and marketing. The next thing is relationships. I think relationships are the most important thing in business. Opportunities will come up all the time, even if it's just going on someone's podcast, or I have loads of friends in my programs. Like my friend that I'm staying in Tulum with, we've got an Airbnb together for a month. She was in Spiritual Coaching Academy and she's in Sacred Sisters. And I have multiple friends that pay to be, I don't give them discounts, like they pay to be in my programs. I've got 2 friends in Bestselling Book Queen. Like, so relationships are really important. Because I think even when you're just friends with someone, they know what type of person you are, and they trust you. They can see, I'm organized. They know it's going to be good quality. It's not going to be like sloppy or messy or anything like that. So then they trust me to come in. So I think relationships, incredibly important. The third thing is systems. So like getting everything set up in a way that removes you from the process as much as possible. So using tools like Calendly, instead of having a back and forth conversation of when are we going to schedule in and sending them an invite and all this stuff, like things like Calendly, getting people onto your email list, having the systems in place to remove you from the process as much as possible. The fourth thing, I think, is bravery to go your own way. And this is something that you learn in business as well. You, at the beginning, you don't trust yourself at all. So you try everyone else's tactics. Then they start to feel out of tune, or they don't work for you. And eventually you realize, oh, I just really need to be brave here. And I really need to trust what I'm being called to do and go for it, even if it doesn't make total sense or no one else is doing it. And I think bravery is definitely the last part. And obviously, with fear of judgment and coming out, it all requires bravery.
Yeah, thank you. Amazing. There's interest in business, relationships, systems, and bravery. Yeah. I want to just quickly touch on your point about business, because I see it too. It's something that I have come up against. It was deep there in my subconscious of oftentimes in the spiritual realm, maybe you see this of people that are kind of way showers, seers, light workers, and they can see where we're going, or they even have memories of past lives of like, ancient future, Atlantis, Lemuria, where we weren't in corrupt systems. The economy as it is does have corruption within it. If you're energetically sensitive, you can feel into that, you can see past things. And yet here we are, we're within it right now. And definitely something that I've come up against, being a big part of this year for me, is okay, cool, this is not the ideal, and yet to make change right now we have to operate within the system that's here, and like really just accepting that, and then allowing ourselves to be that human, you know, in this time frame, as well as this spiritual being that has all of that other incredible gifts and memories, and bringing them together so they can get along and come into harmony. Yeah, that's been big for me. Maybe someone that's listening can resonate with that, finding peace within it and then getting excited again, because I think sometimes we can swing, right, like you said, going from business to spiritual. We can have that swing in terms of like what we accept within ourselves as well, and really allowing like both sides. Relationships, I love that. Yes, first two people that came on a retreat I led here in Turkey were two people I met as Spirit Junkies, Gabby's masterclass. We hit it off and they were like, you're doing a retreat, we're coming. And it was such a lovely start. So you will meet friends along the way as well, on this journey. Systems and bravery, yeah, the bravery and courage to step forward and to do it your way. I keep seeing, like, you know, the Rebecca Campbell Starseed Oracle deck. Do you have that one? I think
don't, but I know it. Yeah.
there's a card in there called Forge Your Own Way, and it comes up so much. It's really beautiful. So the last thing I want to, one away from the end, talk about, and we're kind of moving into, I feel like naturally anyway, because we're talking about courage and bravery, is this piece of worthiness. And it made me giggle because this is actually what you posted about today and you put your blog about. So this can go really deep, this sense of enoughness. I actually think it can be even more pertinent for older souls, because there's a humility involved and a not wanting to get it wrong and wanting to do right by people. It can be a real barrier to light workers elevating, so no surprise that it's something that you're talking to and tapping into that as well. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about this in terms of this. Is this something that you have faced personally? And also, how does it relate to the much more practical, tangible, making your business functional in terms of revenue and profit? How does it relate? And how is it relate?
Definitely. Yeah, it's so funny you talk about worthiness, because I did literally post that yesterday. I think it's huge. I think that worthiness in business will obviously affect how much you put yourself out there. It's going to affect money in a big way as well. So the first part of money medicine is worthiness, because worthiness is a lot of the work that we need to do in order to attract money. And it's been so interesting, the relationship that I have with my husband, because we're very much yin and yang. And I don't know if part of it's just him being like a white male, like the most privileged type of person that there is. But just seeing his attitude to his self-worth, which he has never really questioned, whereas my attitude to my self-worth has been a very, very troubled journey. I said before about how I had eating disorders for 3 years, which I think is like the lowest place of self-worth you can possibly be. So yeah, it's really been a tough journey. But what happens is, as we start to build our self-worth, which is definitely a journey, and we love ourselves more, we honor ourselves more, the relationships in our life will start to reflect that. The money that starts to come in will begin to reflect that. We'll feel much calmer and more at ease, because when we value ourselves as we are, then we don't feel like we need to change ourselves for anything or anyone. So we can kind of cruise through life with everything changing around us, rather than us having to shapeshift and change depending on the situation that we're in or the people that we're with. So what was your question? How does it affect business?
How what's your journey been with it, and how does it affect business in terms of revenue and profit?
So massively.
I think you answered
Massively.
it really well.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you. I really love that image as well. Someone said to me a few years back now, like, be the center of your own universe, and not in this like egotistical, narcissistic way, but just like be anchored in your true self, so that you are in the center of it, and what's right for you can orbit around you rather than you being pulled out. And I love what you said there about shape shifting into others, because actually energetically that's what we are doing, especially if we have that ability and we're sensitive, right? It's so easy just to be that chameleon. I read people's souls plans, and there's actually an energy. It's the 8-8 energy. It's really beautiful. It kind of looks like water in a puddle, and for me, that's how I feel the energy. It's like we're really adaptable. That's the positive side of it. Really adaptable, really malleable, can really meet people where they're at and speak to them. But the shadow side of it is abandoning self,
Yes.
and losing self in others. And also, when that's chronic, that abandonment of self, when it's something that has been patterned in from childhood, it can be really hard to understand who you truly are, to find self, like that's a whole journey. That's like life, right? To truly anchor more of our soul self into our being. But yeah, thank you so much for speaking to that, of valuing staying within your center, not abandoning your center, and continue to come back, and remembering all parts of us are welcome. Like, you wouldn't have an impactful business if you were just spiritual Liz. You needed to be business owner Liz as well, right?
Yeah.
And practical
Sorry,
Liz.
the cleaner's just got here. I just need to let her in.
No worries. We are moving locations.
Yep.
Beautiful. Well, we're coming to the end now, actually, so it's perfectly timed. Thanks, universe. And I just have one final question to ask, which is, if you had any words of wisdom for those that are just embarking on their path right now, they're hearing the call, maybe the push or the pull factor or both is getting too loud to ignore. Yeah, what words of wisdom do you have for them that will help them as a shining light? They continue
Prioritize what feels good. And this is another lesson that we don't get taught. But when you start on this journey of living in tune, you realize it really is that simple. Just follow what feels good, because that's trying to tell you what you should be doing more of. And also notice what feels bad, what feels like there's resistance, what feels like you don't really want to be doing it, what feels really hard, what feels like you have to drag yourself to do it, because those things are out of alignment. And sometimes that can be temporary, or sometimes it can be saying, this thing really isn't meant to be in your life at all anymore. And it can change. Like, something will feel really good, like we talked about relationships. It can feel really good because they're meant to be in your life for that particular section, and then they start to feel bad, and it's confusing because it's like, oh, they were in tune for me. And same with career, it can be in tune for you at a certain point in time, but then it will change. So just be really open to that change and that shift, but always know that if something lights you up, it feels satisfying, it feels really good in your heart and your soul, it makes you smile, you look forward to it, then that's something that's right for you at this point in time. If something is making you feel anxious, stressed, you feel resistance towards it because you are not in your stomach, then that is also trying to tell you something. And also realize the power that you have. Like, you don't have to accept anything that you don't want. We're autonomous adults. We're adults now. We can choose the life we have and the people that are in it. And this is where the worthiness work comes in as well. When we work on our worthiness, we become less tolerant of things that are out of tune, and we sacrifice less of ourselves, and we become very kind of decisive that things have to be in alignment, because why would I accept any less than that? When we have low worthiness, we'll quite happily settle for everything being out of tune, our love life, our friends, our career, our finances. But as we work on our worthiness, then we stop settling for anything less than living in tune.
Yeah, thank you. I love that. And it's the fierceness, isn't it? Like, I think sometimes when you think of, there can be a connotation of being spiritual as being like the compassionate side, the soft side, the going with the flow. And there is that element to it. But also, like, love has many archetypes, many sides to it. And one is like that fierceness, that Kali energy, that Sekhmet energy that's like, I'm not putting up with this. And yeah, thank you so much for that. When years ago, before I even stepped on my spiritual path, I went to Bali. It's maybe when healing started, I first discovered yoga. And I used to sketch in my sketchbook, just doodles and things. And I actually look back now and realize that I was channeling, and now I channel mandalas and messages. And I wrote, and I found it in so many other journals after that as well, like, do what lights you up to shine bright for others. Like, that is the light worker path at the end of the day. That's why we're here. So we get to feel good first. We don't need to cut ourselves out of our mission, which can be a big learning for those that have perhaps had the witch wound, right? The persecution wound, and also maybe martyrdom in other lives, or that bodhisattvic energy. So yeah, thank you for that permission slip that maybe I think we all need to be reminded of again and again. So thank you. And that's all the questions I have today, Liz. It has been such a joy and a pleasure. Thank you for coming on, and thank you for sharing your own personal journey and experience and little nuggets of gold as well.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so fun and so interesting to hear the resonance in our paths. So thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Thank you, honey. Bye.
Bye.